Welcome back to Errol Morris. Errol, let me ask a question. Words play such an important in this film, the meaning of words and language, and you made that prominent in the film. I wonder if you could talk more about what you came away thinking about words in the context of this film.
It's a complicated question because the use of language in this movie is complex. Language is a way of conveying information, and language is a way of obscuring information. There was a screening of a rough cut of this film at MIT. We hadn't quite finished the movie. And a mathematician came up to me, a friend of mine, and said, "Are you aware that a lot of what he says are contradictions?" I suppose in logic, the form of P and not P. And I said, yes, in fact, I was aware of that. And they went on to say, are you aware that from a contradiction you can prove anything? And I said, yes, I was aware of that too. The movie actually starts more or less with a contradiction. Rumsfeld saying that preparing for war can be a cause of war, and not preparing for war can be a cause of war. And I point out to him, but wait a second. From that kind of argument, you can justify anything. And indeed you can. Another one of my favorites, the absence of evidence is an evidence of absence. Sounds good on the face of it, but if you think about it just a wee little bit, it becomes somewhat disturbing. We had this exchange of emails. In fact, I was the recipient of many snowflakes from Donald Rumsfeld. I offered to show him rough cuts of the film, and he saw at least, whether he's seen this last version or not, I'm still not sure, but he's been sent 4 different rough cuts of the movie and would send me back elaborate notes. And in one note he said, I should have written that absence of evidence is an evidence of absence or evidence of presence. And indeed, he should have written that, but that isn't what he wrote. And the memo was sent to, guess who? The President of the United States, at a time when they were deciding whether or not to, what? Invade Iraq. Because why? Because Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. What evidence do you have? Well, maybe we have evidence, maybe we don't. But after all, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. In a less charitable mode, I pointed out, I could tell you that there are flying monkeys headed this way, armed with thermonuclear weapons. And you in turn would say to me, sorry to put words in the mouth of the audience, you would say to me, well, what evidence do you have of these flying monkeys armed with thermonuclear weapons? And I would smile and I would say, absence of evidence. We should have a sort of a group reading here where everybody recites the line, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. What a nightmare.
Errol, I want to ask you something about your interviewing technique. You once said to me that anytime someone shows up to an interview with you with a list of prepared questions, you know it's going to be a bad interview. I should add that I was holding a list of prepared questions when you said this.
You don't have one tonight, I notice.
When you interviewed Rumsfeld, it feels like you're well prepared with research into his memos. And to talk about the style of your approach to conducting those interviews.
The approach is very simple, really prepare. I felt often like I was cramming for an exam. Not having a list of questions that you're going to ask doesn't mean that you don't prepare for the interview. Quite the contrary. It means that you do prepare, but you don't know exactly where the evidence is going to lead. My favorite example of this is my first interview with Robert McNamara over 10 years ago. I really prepared. I had read all of the books, and then some. McNamara arrived at the studio on a Tuesday morning. That weekend, previous weekend, the New York Times Magazine had run an interview with Bob Kerrey, who had won a Congressional Medal of Honor in Vietnam and had been recently accused of being a war criminal. And I asked McNamara if he had seen this article. He said, in fact, he had. And he went on to say that, properly speaking, Bob Kerrey was not a war criminal. The war criminal was himself. And so I sat him down very quickly and started the interview. But there was no way to prepare for something like that. It just somehow happened. And many of what I consider to be the more memorable moments in my interview with Rumsfeld were things that you could never really prepare for. Some things, yes, but many things, no. I certainly was prepared when he went on and on about the migration of techniques at Guantanamo to Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, he cites all of the reports. Richard said that there was no such thing, and then I read to him from the Schlesinger report. It's one of the oddest moments for me in any film that I've ever made, and certainly any interview that I've been part of, where I read to him from the Schlesinger report, basically contradicting, I'll take out the word basically, contradicting what he had just said. And he looks at me and he says, I would agree with that. There's an essay that I really, truly love. Could it be my favorite essay? Very close to it, if not my favorite essay, by Arnold Schopenhauer. bless his heart, called The Art of Controversy. Not enough people read this essay. I recommend it to everyone. At the very beginning of the essay, Schopenhauer says there are two ways to win an argument. There's logic and there's dialectic. Everybody knows you can never win an argument with logic. So let's forget about that and move on quickly to dialectic. And then he proceeds to give you 30 ways to win an argument any way you can. One of the ways you're arguing with someone, you have completely demolished what they have had to say. And then they look you right in the eye and they say, I'm really glad you've come around to my way of thinking.
I'm being given a signal that we have to wrap up soon, but let me ask you one quick question, which is about the craft in your film. Your approach to telling the story is distinct.
Graft or craft?
C-R-A-F-T.
Yes.
You take very deliberate care over your image making, over music, over your pacing. Can you talk about your attention to craft?
I'm a filmmaker. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Making a movie. Before we run out of time, I should say that music plays a very, very important part of every film I've made. Certainly my most recent efforts. And I feel very fortunate to have this score by Danny Elfman, which I really believe is extraordinary. It is very, very sad that you can't be nominated, at least so far, for an Oscar for writing music for a documentary. But I do believe an exception should be made in this instance.
You're the first audience at the festival. See the film. If you want to vote for it, you can take your ticket stub and put it in the box that says vote. We have another screening of the film, so tell your friends if you like it. I hope you get to see a lot more films. Thank you very much for coming, and thanks especially to Errol Morris.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Tom Powell.